Tonight's conversation is part of the Aspen Leadership Series, Conversations with Great Leaders in memory of Preston Robert Tisch. This is an incredibly exciting program for us and is really the vanguard of what is going to be an increasing presence in New York City. We are very grateful to the children of the late Bob Tisch, whose life work inspires us not only to think about great leaders and leadership, but also inspires us in whatever we might be doing to use our own opportunities for leadership to make a difference in the communities in which we're engaged. The generous support of those children in memory of their father has made this program possible, and we thank Jonathan and Lizzie, Stephen, and especially Lori, who's a great friend of the Aspen Institute and who really inspired this entire wonderful partnership. I'd also like to recognize Bob Steele, our chairman, and the city's deputy mayor. I haven't seen Jennifer Robb yet. I think she will be joining us, the president of Hunter College. Of course, we thank Hunter College for making this magnificent house available to us for our programming in New York. And special thanks also to Mike Richter. Mike is in the front row. Mike is a hockey great in his own right. And now, at the pinnacle of his career, he has attained the honor of being a Cato Fellow of the Aspen Institute, which is our group of young leaders in the environment and green technology. As a matter of fact, he just flew here from Guatemala, where they had a very exciting seminar. And he was key in making this evening possible, so we thank you very much, Mike. Now, for tonight's program, I think I have to disappoint you. You're probably wondering why the screen. We are not going to be showing Stanley Cup clips, I'm sorry to say.
If I would have known, I would have brought it.
Unfortunately, we simply don't know how to get it back up in the ceiling. But let's move directly to tonight's program, and we're absolutely thrilled, of course, to present Mark Messier, a name in the ranks of professional sports that's absolutely synonymous with leadership. He's not only known for his athletic prowess that won him 6 Stanley Cups, but also his power to inspire, his leadership not only on the ice, but off the ice, and so he's a perfect complement to this program. It's really an honor to have you here with us, and we appreciate it very much. As I said earlier, the series is in memory of Bob Tisch, and Bob Tisch did so many things, of course, but of course one of those things was his co-ownership of the New York Giants. And in that capacity, he was known for his own, the values he placed on sports and their contribution to the community, but also the value of sports as a reason for physical activity for children and for public health. And for all those things, we are very, very grateful. So we think it's particularly fitting in this series in honor of Bob Tisch to be honoring someone like Mark Messier. I also want to mention that we're pursuing this topic in somewhat broader fashion as well. We're in the process of creating a program at the Aspen Institute, which we call the Sports and Society Program. It will cover a myriad of issues relating to sports, especially those involving kids, like health and obesity, access to physical activity, but also related to the values of sport, the incredibly important values of sport to leadership and character and teamwork and all the other things, as well as looking at instances where sometimes those values get a little bit askew. We're going to launch this program in May, and Tom Ferry, tonight's moderator, and an Emmy Award-winning sports journalist and author, and you have his biography, short biography in your program, will be heading that program up. So if any of you are interested in this broader program that we hope will become a leading influence in the country on that intersection of sports and society, please talk to Tom. So without any further ado, I'd like to welcome our guests, and Tom will do further introductions and then begin a conversation that I hope all of us can join in on. Thank you.
Well, it's a real pleasure to be here tonight. Thank you, everyone, for coming, and thank you, Elliot, for the nice introduction. I'm a kid who grew up in Florida, 10 blocks from the beach, imagining myself being, Mercury Morris, jumping over the waves. I'm imagining myself at the goal line, and I grew up playing tennis, golf, baseball, any number of sports, not hockey. So I knew almost nothing about hockey growing up, but I did know the name Mark Messier. It might be one of the 2 or 3 names that I knew about hockey. This is a legendary figure we have with us tonight, and we're so glad to have him. Not just because you won 6 Stanley Cup championships, but because of your leadership, your longevity. This is someone who played in the game a quarter century. Played in 4 different decades?
4 different decades, yeah. Wow.
I mean, it's a good thing we don't have Masters hockey. We'd still be going, right?
At least I got my Masters in something, yeah.
But, Mark is not just an athlete. He's an incredibly thoughtful person. I've spoken to him several times. Last year at the Lake Placid Sport Forum, we talked on the phone about these issues, and I think you're going to be really interested to hear what he has to say about these topics. He's a father as well. You coach your son.
Yes, so I got to practice what I preach now, yeah. Yeah, I got a 7-year-old playing and a daughter that's 5 years old, so we're going through the whole minor sport deal right now ourselves, so it's very interesting.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. Let me start off this way. I mean, Mark, again, a quarter century in hockey. A lot of people watched you all these years. What would you hope that they learned from watching you and your career?
Oh, that's a tough question. I was very lucky. I had a father that played hockey. He was a school teacher. He started a program in Portland, Oregon. They didn't even have hockey when he was finishing up his career there. Got his master's in education. In child psychology and all that. So he was very interested in children and the development of children. And so when he retired, we moved back to Edmonton, Alberta. That's when we really kind of started our hockey careers. And he coached us and brought us along and coached junior hockey and things like that. So I guess I was very fortunate to have a father who played hockey and, of course, had a very good idea of how to play the game, but more importantly, how to nurture that kind of hockey IQ, or if you want to call it. And so, as my minor hockey league career kept moving along, and became obvious that I was going to take this more seriously and try to make a go of it, I found myself being drafted and then actually playing in the National Hockey League. And of course, at that time, as a young boy, you're only just trying to make the team. I had no idea, I was going to play actually 26 years pro because I played one in the WHA, but never would imagine that all the things that would have happened to me that did over those 26 years. But when I look back on my career, and I've said it, when I retired and everything else there, in the end there, it's not about the trophies and the accomplishments there. It really gets down to the people that you spent the time with, and those are the memories that are everlasting. And I think I just did some interviews today because I turned 50 it's 8 days ago, and Wayne Gretzky turned 50 today. And so they were kind of acknowledging his 50th birthday and his great accomplishments. And I said we recognized very early that we had a bigger obligation when we started to win our first Stanley Cup of how we acted on and off the ice, that there were children and people looking up to us, and we had a big responsibility. So I think, through it there, it became obviously, you know a lot more when you're 44 than you do when you're 24, and mistakes along the way. But as my career progressed, it became apparent that there was something kind of bigger going on here that I needed to pay attention to, and sure enough, try to do that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the NHL has the Mark Messier Leadership Award. You captained 2 teams to Stanley Cup titles where you were the captain. I don't know if anybody's done that in pro sports. Is it leadership Is that what you would hope people look at you and your career for? That example that you set?
Well, it's hard to kind of talk about myself in that light because I've been retired 7 years now, so I've had an opportunity to look back and try to figure out why people were talking to me about these leadership. When I was playing, I was just trying to win. That was especially, and of course, once you do win, you realize that there are certain things that have to be in place in order to win. And so it become, for me, I started asking questions along the way of, why are we having success and why are we being talked about in this regard and all those things. And then, of course, then we won a second Stanley Cup, and then the recipe starts to be very evident of what needs to be in place on a team. And those things that I'm talking about, that the team chemistry and the interpersonal relationships and the team environment and the respect that you need for one another and all those things really have to be focal points of the team. Of course you need the talent, but even with the talent, without all that infrastructure in place, it would be very hard to become a champion because it's so hard and you spend so much time together and there's so much, you rely so much on every person in that dressing room to win a team sport championship, especially in hockey. And so, yeah, those are, so, here we are, 7 years retired, and I've had an opportunity to kind of, look into that and explore myself about what leadership really is and what it really is all about. And like I said, I was conscious of it, but didn't have the time or really asking myself those questions. Well, what is leadership? And certainly, what did I do as a leader to, maybe be successful in our arena?
So what is it? What's the key? Give us the secret in the sauce.
I don't think there's any one key because I think there's so many elements of leadership that you could discuss. It's a billion-dollar business. Books, movies, people have written about it, articles across many different aspects of life, not just sports. For me, in our sport, I understood at a very early age, or not an early age, when I became captain, that I could not win alone. I was not the player that had the talent to take a team and score the goals or whatever, and I needed everybody's participation and help in order to be successful. And so that might have been from an upbringing or whatever from my father, because he was that kind of player. He's a team player. He was a tough guy, fighter, tough defenseman who played for the team, did everything for the team. So I think that might have been, having grown up in that kind of environment, helped me in that regard. So I tried to foster the idea that in order to have the trust of the leader, that I needed to get to know these people and players on a more of an interpersonal relationship away from the game. And so that was one of the things that I tried to do. I tried to take all the teams that I was on and really try to bring the group together off the ice there and really kind of get to know what inspired you or what motivated you, because all the players are always motivated differently. Some are motivated by money, some are motivated by success, some are motivated to please their fathers, some are motivated to live the lifestyle and the dream of playing in the NHL. So, in order to really kind of understand what inspired these players, I needed to get to know them on a much deeper level than just coming to the rink. By doing that, I think they got to know me because I knew that I had to be completely transparent as a player and as a person, and very consistent in my attitude coming to the rink every day. So they really knew who I was. I got to know them. And when you get in those situations that become very tough at times, I could look at a player and really give him the brutal truth without him taking it very personally, because I didn't have a vendetta against you. I didn't have any other ulterior motive other than to try to get the best out of you as a player. And sometimes that has to be done in a not so comforting way, if that makes sense.
And you had the credibility to do that because you had spent the time to get to know them.
But the credibility doesn't mean anything. When I came to New York, I'd come after being on a team that had won 5 Stanley Cups. But the credibility might have been there from the time that I walked in the dressing room, but that credibility would have quickly dissipated if I didn't have something to back up for those people that were in those rooms, in that room. So the credibility coming in is one thing, but to keep the credibility, I had to figure out a way how to do something with this group of players, not live on and talk about what I had done in Edmonton coming in here. So the credibility was fine, but then I had to go and start completely over, and that's why I said when I got traded, I need to start a brand new, career now, basically completely scratch. I can't even talk about Edmonton to these players because they don't care. They don't care how you did in Edmonton. How are we going to do it? And so then that's where the process started with developing those kinds of relationships again.
That's interesting. Leadership almost starts, and correct me if I'm wrong, it starts with empathy. It's getting to know who that person is from their perspective.
Well, I think you have to have compassion. I mean, these players are the best players in the world there, but they all come from different kinds of backgrounds and family lives and different, and so they're bringing a lot to the table that doesn't manifest itself sometimes in the hockey rink. But in order for that person to untap his talent to be the best that he can be and to be able to count on him when the pressure comes, that's when the problems will manifest itself, when the pressure gets on and things aren't going well. And he's not, a particular player isn't doing well and the coach is on him, the pressure's on him, and he feels the fans are on him. That's when the leaks or the cracks will start to get in there. So, establishing those kinds of relationships where you talk, they're having the compassion, they're understanding where he's come from. I played with players that in seventh game of Stanley Cup Finals that couldn't get on the ice, just completely froze. And but everybody knew that and had an understanding of this kind of player and his fears and all these things. And so, we had a lot of empathy or compassion for him and didn't hold it against him and kind of tried to bring him around and things. So many stories like that.
That's interesting. Now you coach, as we said, your son's hockey
team.
Yeah. What do you try to achieve with those kids as a coach?
Well, I think the success of coaching a 7-year-old team can be summed up very easily by that if we have every kid that's on that team this year enrolls next year, that would be a success. Because that means that they're having fun and they want to come back.
Yeah.
And I think that for me is, I do the same thing with the baseball team, and I do the same thing with soccer, and now I'm not captain. I used to be the captain of the New York Rangers, then I become Captain Daddy. Now I'm the captain of the baseball and the football and the coaching and all that thing. So, but yeah, I think that can be measured as a success. I think at the same time, even at that age, and we play at the Boys and Girls Club out in Greenwich, which is a very introductory program. I lived in South Carolina for 5 years when I retired, and so we didn't have ice hockey down there. So my boy never played hockey till we moved up here last year, and so he needed to start at a very introductory level. And the Boys and Girls Club, they have their own rink, and it's Tuesday practices and Sundays games. So very introductory. But having said that there's not a lot of pressure and things like that. There's a 6-team league all inside the Boys and Girls Club. You can still instill the things that are important from youth sports. Discipline. There's certain. When the whistle blows, you're here. You're not. Dressing room etiquette, all the things that we talked about. So you can instill those and still have a fairly, the kids are competitive, but the program itself is very kind of introductory. So that's what I'm trying to do, is really kind of instill, I want the players to get themselves dressed, hopefully, as much as they can. I'm trying to, I'm saying you got to give your mom a break. You can put your stuff on. I'll help you with their skates, or they can help you with their skates. But so things like that the kids can handle. Because I know all the parents are in here. They know what I'm talking about. Because, but that's important.
Yeah.
Those things are important.
Now you're entering I've written a book about. I spent 5 years studying the culture of youth sports in this country. And there is no more ramped up youth sports culture, as Mike knows and as you know, than hockey itself. It's extremely intense. Now that you're getting into it, now that you're seeing the full tableau, what are your thoughts on the culture of youth hockey today?
Oh boy, I'm a little horrified where I guess youth sports has gone, and it's just not hockey. I mean, football, as you can imagine, is super intense too, and baseball, and it gets political. Then when it gets political, then then money's involved, and once money's involved, then it gets super political, and we've just trying to fast track our kids into professional and sports-specific professionalization of our sports, especially hockey. And it is not going to matter one bit if these kids are doing that at 7, 8, 9 years old, whether they're going to turn out to be an NHL player. And I've seen it 100 times, but the people that control the ice and the people that are selling this propaganda that this is what the kids need to do in order to become a professional hockey player are in it for the money. It's a business for them. And they've managed to sell the Kool-Aid to the parents, and it's horrifying to see. The family structure has been completely torn apart. Tournaments used to go from Saturdays and Sundays. Now they start Thursdays, and it's every weekend. The family's loading up their other 3 kids in the station wagon or the van to go, and they're sitting around spending their youth in hotel hallways and lobbies, and in the end, it's instead of paying for hotel rooms from Friday, Saturday for one night, now it's 4 nights and gas, and they keep you there so you have to stay in the hotel, and none of it will make a difference whether the kid plays professional sports, and that's not what minor sports is supposed to be about anyways. Mm-hmm. It's about and we talked about it in Lake Placid, it's about the emotional and physical well-being of our kids, not about whether they're going to be a professional athlete at 7 years old. Mm-hmm. And we see the data to prove it, injuries and sport specific. You got 7-year-olds only playing one sport. I mean, it's horrifying.
Mm-hmm. How does the experience of a kid today differ from your experience growing up?
Well, there's a big difference. One is that the money in the game when I grew up wasn't different from all the other professionals, doctors, lawyers, dentists. I mean, hockey players weren't making more money than those other professions. So there wasn't such a need or a lottery ticket for your son to become a professional player and win the big contract. And so because of it, it was competitive. But if you didn't play hockey, geez, there's a lot of other things that you could go do and make the same kind of salary. And also, I grew up in Edmonton, Alberta, where the weather permitted, where there was a lot more access to ice. And so we had a lot more opportunity to play on our own.
Pond hockey,
shinny hockey. If you wanted to go to the rink, you went to the rink. Mm-hmm. We'd come home after school and we wouldn't have organized practice, so we'd go down there and play a shinny game because that's where we hung out at the, much like someone in a warmer climate might hang around the tennis court or whatever the sport may be. So things have changed in that regard immensely, and of course the sports specific in our sports, now they have stick handling coaches and they have psychologists and they have all these things to try to make sure you're goaltending coaches. Mike's a goaltender coach now, so it's changed dramatically in that regard as well.
Yeah.
Where there wasn't such that drive to professionalize our sports at an early age.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What is the value of we talked about pond hockey a little bit there. I mean, everything is so organized today, and adults are always telling kids where to play and how to do this and how to do that. What is the in your opinion, what's the value of unstructured play, free play, just getting out there with your buddies, pickup games and so forth? Does that, I know it's fun, does that actually make you a better player, or is that just screwing around?
No, it doesn't make you a worse player, and it certainly can make you a better player. And the other day we had practice, and a few kids were late, so I got on the ice, but I didn't do anything, and I just put the nets in place and dropped the puck. These kids instantly had a game going. And there was probably, maybe 14, 15, 16 kids on the ice. And they just started playing the game. They didn't pick, they had their blue uniform on red uniform, but there was red uniform, blue uniforms, kids on the same, they just started playing the game. And it was fascinating to watch ours because that's what we did. I mean, when we had the opportunity to go play without any supervision, you go down there, and we had kids that would be 16 years old, and would be kids down there at 7 years old. I just got back from Switzerland, and hockey and cross-country skiing are big exercise sports. So they just go down to the outside rinks and start playing. But it's amazing to see how these 16-year-old kids can play with 7-year-old kids and adapt the game in order for them to play without any supervision. They take it easy on them, but they let them get the puck, and they slow the game down when the one kid will get it. And then when he moves it up, then the game will pick up, and he'll try to keep pace. But they'll play together from so that 7-year-old kid is being, having to keep up, so he improves. The 16-year-old kid is learning compassion and empathy, like you're talking about, for the kid that's on the playground and wants to play. So he's not going to say you can't play in our game. So he includes him in. So this whole, unsupervised game that happens amongst the kids themselves there, and it happened when I was a kid, and I just saw it happen in Switzerland, and I just saw it happen, although we didn't have the age differences at the Boys and Girls Club, the kids know what's going on.
Mm-hmm. So how do we've identified several problems, how do we begin to fix these problems?
Well, there's a lot of problems, and the biggest problem that I see, and I'll just use our little environment, there's just not enough rinks. And because there's not enough ice time, the ice time becomes very valuable. And so the people that run the rinks or hold the ice time, control the ice. And so that's a big problem.
And therefore control the whole environment.
They control the whole environment.
Yeah. So we need more ice. We need
more ice. We need more ice, and I would like to see more I would like to see more outside rinks that can be used as sport courts and all that. But when we've had the weather like we've had the last month or so, month and a half, these outside rinks we could be using that for ice. We only have, I think, 1 or 2 of those maybe, all out in Greenwich. So you could have those, so you could turn them into the parks, or you could turn them into ice arenas. That's one thing. Ice. So without getting too deep into that, but having the more ice is one thing, and taking the money out of it is critical. We can't be. It should be non-for-profit. You know what I mean? I don't think. The amount of money that they're paying to play these in these leagues now is credible, because it's all geared towards tournaments.
Yeah, yeah.
And and then politics. I mean, you got to get the politics out of it. Politics. We got 3 organizations out in our area there, but they barely play. The only time they play each other is when they go, to Pennsylvania in a tournament. You know what I mean? And we're spending all this money on hotels and all that, where we could just be playing in our, you know what I mean? But they don't want to play because they're worried about the record and the state championship and who's the best and da-da-da-da-da. And
you got to wonder if you're even getting the best athletes if the only kids who can afford the game at that level are those from upper income homes, right? I mean...
And the other thing, well, that is true. And the specialization of these A leagues is crazy. I mean, the most important thing is, like I talked about, even for 9-year-olds or 10-year-olds or whatever, is that I don't want every guy on my team, I shouldn't say I don't think it's healthy to have every guy on the team great players. I think they need to learn that and the kids that are on the third line, if you want to call it, first, second, third, whatever you want to call it there, the first line has to be able to rely on the third line because they can't be on the ice the whole game in order to win. And so they learned how to really help these kids that may not be so good. So they learned, the lessons of being on a team, inclusion, empathy, sympathy, compassion for these players that might not be so good. The bottom players have to try to keep up to the better players so they improve. And so you got this whole melting pot of kids. But right now you got all these entitled programs that are only for the best players there. So they go through their whole careers, never for once even thinking about what it might be like to play with a child that might not be as good, or how to carry a child or a teammate that might not be as good, or even understand that, you know what I mean? So the life lessons aren't being established at the youth sport right now, in my mind. And the whole thing about youth sports at that age is to prepare our kids for real life. And it's not real life the way it is. And so all of a sudden, when they get failure, handling failure is almost an oddity now, because they beat teams 30-0 and 15-0, and all of a sudden when they have to face a little adversity, they don't have the tools to do it because they haven't had to. And so the whole system is just designed for an elite group of kids there. And even with that, it doesn't ensure them the end game, which is so we're losing all these kids, and we're fostering these kids, and it doesn't ensure them to get to where they want to go, to the end game.
Right. Another problem hockey has is the concussion issue. It has, among youth players in youth sports, it has the highest level, the highest concussion rate. We've heard about football quite a bit, but hockey's actually a little bit higher. In your mind, what do we do about that?
Well, it's a huge topic and we're really at a crossroads, I think, in our sport right now. And I'm probably more aware of it now because we've come up with a helmet, a new design of a helmet in our sport that helps prevent concussions. And so over the last 2 years, it's always a thing. Be careful what you ask for. I got onto this, and 2 years later, I'm deep in the woods of this whole concussion epidemic in our sport, and trying to help it and fix it. So that's one of the things. But the sport itself it's very tough, because it is a tough sport, just like football. And I don't buy the notion that the players don't have respect for each other. I played the game for 26 years, and I know the players have a tremendous amount of respect for each other. But at our level, at the NHL level, at the highest level there, it's, winning becomes at all costs.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead. No.
Go ahead, yeah.
So there was a journal, a JAMA study that came out recently that showed that 11 and 12-year-old ice hockey players who play in a league where body checking is not permitted are 3 times less likely to suffer concussions than other injuries. Now, you and I have talked about this on the phone the other night. There's a little bit of nuance to this argument, but I thought that was a really interesting study. What is your thought on whether checking should be allowed at that level?
Well, I have mixed emotions, because when I grew up playing hockey, we didn't have masks, and some of most of the players in the NHL weren't even wearing helmets. So completely different era. But when we used to go to the outdoor rinks and play a shinny game, and anybody who would get their stick up, everybody on the ice would say, "Hey, keep your stick down." And nobody wore shin pads, so if you you're too careless and you hit someone in the shin there, everybody would say, "Hey," and then pretty soon, if you kept doing it, you weren't allowed to play. So you really had a deep respect of how to play the game, keep your stick down, and the dangers that were there, lurking around every corner if you didn't handle your own stick properly. So fast forward to today's game, where we've tried to protect our players so much. We've engulfed them with this body armor. We put face masks on them, and these kids grow up there without any idea of the consequences for their actions with their sticks. So then the body checking part of it is, we learned to body check from the time we got on the ice. And I agree with you. If you don't allow body checking, you're going to have less concussions. There's no doubt about it. My feeling is that I would rather teach these kids the basic survival instincts that you need to play the game.
Because at some point they will be introduced.
Because at some point, if they continue on, they are going to have to learn how to do that. They are going to have these survival instincts in order to play the game at its highest level. And it is my belief that I think that our kids are losing the survival instincts because they just don't know. And so when I grew up playing hockey, we would do drills in hockey where a player would carry the puck down and around behind in the corner of the net. You would come in, you would angle him off, you would separate, get in front of him, and then you would knock him off the puck, and then the puck would be here. So you learn those kinds of basic techniques of playing hockey. You learn that you don't turn your back to the boards. You always keep your shoulders parallel to the boards. I mean, I never turned my back for 26 years in the National Hockey League. And now players turn their back because it's an offensive play because they know the player can't hit them from behind. Well, guess what? Not every player is not going to hit them from behind. But I knew I'm not going to turn my back because I know if I do, someone is going to. Or I'm not going to take the chance. And I was able to play 26 years because those survival instincts are critical. So I'm not saying to take the mask off. I'm not saying to take less equipment, but we have to teach our kids the instinctual. I watch the games now. Of course, I work with the Rangers and I watch hockey all the time, and players are getting suspended. And I'm watching. I'm going, the guy who got hit should be the one suspended for putting himself in that position. How can anybody play this game knowing the dangers that are out there and put himself in that vulnerable position? It just can't happen. And so we see it all the time now because, in our effort to try to protect our players, we've left them more vulnerable.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you about this. There was a fascinating article in the New York Times in December, and I'll just read you the first 3 or 4 sentences which summarize what they've done there. It said that some youth games in this hockey-mad state were a bloodbath just a few years ago, but the mayhem has all but disappeared. All but gone too are hits to the head and dangerous checks from behind. Penalty rates have dropped sharply. Although there are no reliable statistics, many say that serious injuries are down. Enrollment in youth leagues is markedly up. And all it took was a tweak to the standings. In 2004, worried about the growing violence surrounding youth hockey, Minnesota Hockey introduced the fair play point, an extra point in the standings awarded, sorry, my eyes are going on me here, awarded to teams win or lose for each game in which they take fewer than a designated number of penalty minutes. And the fair play point is in effect for all youth leagues outside of high school competition, and Minnesota is the only state to do that. Is that a solution? What do you feel? How do you feel about that?
Well, that's the first. When you showed me that, that was the first time I've heard about it. And Minnesota is really kind of the cutting edge of hockey right now. They've been a big endorser of our helmets. We got over 200 teams in Minnesota. It doesn't surprise me there because talking to the people there that are responsible for the high school hockey there and the hockey school programs, they really take it seriously and are really on a march to make things right there. I don't have any problem with that extra point.
You like the idea of a fair play point?
I don't mind it. I think there's something to be said about it. Mm-hmm. I think that hockey, we will never eliminate concussions. I don't think there's any room in the game now for deliberate hits to the head, and I think that we've allowed it to happen by suspending our players for games and monetarily fining our players for it. But I think that has to be addressed, and much stiffer penalties would need to be addressed for players that deliberately hit a player to the head. The sticky point gets into because we can lock it down frame by frame and try to analyze whether the intent was there. But our sport happens so quickly. The closing speeds in our sport are unimaginable to people that have never played the game or even been down at ice level. And so, getting the proper call and ruling would be very, very important in that regard. Mm-hmm. But I agree with the bloodbath. I mean, it's not, that was gone in the 70s. Our game has evolved to a much more sophisticated game now, which is great. We've changed rules to get the talent and the speed and the artistry back in our game, and it still can be competitive and it still can be tough hockey without going over that line. And I'm sitting here playing in an era. I grew up in an era where it was, I looked for guys with their back turned. I hate to say it. I hate to say it, but it's just true. You know what I mean? Because if you could take somebody out, you did. But it was a different game back then. So, and I don't even, I'm not even proud of it. But and that's why I never turned my back, because I know a lot of players were looking for me. There's a lot coming back my way. But the game has changed, and for the better there. And so we really need to take out the unnecessary, violent hits to the head that are just unwarranted, don't have any place in our sport. And at the youth level there, I think that is awesome. I think there's nothing wrong with that, and especially when you get into that kind of 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 age group where they're very competitive and they're starting to get strong, and there's all that testosterone, and they're really trying to take it to each other. And
kids' bodies at that age are so different. So you have men and you have boys,
and we know that their brains they're not capable of making the right decisions all the time. So how do we take a bad situation and really kind of educate them that this is just not the way our game is played. So because we're not trying to hurt our kids, but there's a certain protocol that our sport needs to start to follow at an early age, so we're not seeing it up at the. And of course, the NHL players need to start following a stronger protocol because our kids emulate the players at the NHL level. We know that they watch every game. They, it's you go watch the junior leagues, and it's almost a mirror of the NHL. They do the whole things, and so. We definitely need to address some of those points at the NHL level to curtail that, because we're at a crisis in our sport right now. The numbers are just too daunting to keep going the way it is, and the injuries and long-term injuries.
Yeah, you want to see Sidney Crosby on the ice.
Got to have the players on the ice.
Absolutely. Well, I won't leave enough room here for questions, but thanks for talking through a couple of these solutions here. The Sports and Society program at Aspen is really all about finding solutions. So great insights. Let's take some questions.
I got a mic, yeah.
Well, first of all, thank you. You did my family and my father great honor being here, and this is exactly what he liked what he felt. So thank you so much for being here. So I have a question that bothered me about 12 or 13 years ago when my daughter, who's here tonight, was a field hockey player. And you talked about life lessons. She went to a fairly progressive school and was on the field hockey team, and fortunately got to play a lot. Some of the girls didn't play as much. The coach didn't choose to put them in. And you've seen 12 or 13-year-old girls. They cry a lot. and it was something that always bothered me. It was a team that, when they first started, were not very good. It was not very good, then went on to win All-City, I think. It was really a dilemma, because the parents of the kids who didn't play complained, really wanted the kids to play. It certainly wasn't professional field hockey. It wasn't even college. And there was always a dilemma of, should they play, shouldn't they play? And as they got to be 13, 14, 15, should they be given more team time? Nobody wants to be on a team that loses all the time. That doesn't make anybody happy. On the other hand, it's high school, it's junior high school, it's high school. And I'd love to hear.
It's funny you asked that, because
feelings on that.
So Mike's son plays with us, and he's a good little player. So we have 10 kids on our team. So we have 2 lines. I tell the other coaches, let's put the better players on the first line, so they can compete against each other, and the kids that are just starting on the second shift, so they can kind of so not everybody's getting run over, and they have more time or opportunity to get the puck. So we were down 7-6, and of course. With and we break up our shifts 2 minutes at a time, so the last shift comes, and it's the B shift's turn. Well, I'm getting holes burned through me by the other guys wanting to stay on the ice, and so the B shift comes out, and of course they score the winning goal, or the tying goal to tie us up. Well, after the game, they're questioning my integrity as a coach and what exactly I know about coaching and my commitment to winning at 7 years old. So we should never underestimate the kids' instinctual need to compete and win. And I think you can do that without doing what you're talking about. And for me, it's all about the objectives are, and setting the objectives for the kids early. Because if it's all about winning, you know, you're missing a sea full of life lessons along the way. And if you don't win, then everything else is a failure.
Exactly.
And so setting the expectations as a coach is critical. And the other thing, Tom, when I talked about the other day, you don't send your child to school and you never talk to the teacher. You know, having the relationship, if you're going to trust a coach with your son or daughter, the parents and the coach have to have an open dialogue, because you're only there to help the child. You're not there because your child isn't good enough to get on the ice and you're a coach and you want to win. That's not what the objective is. And so the thought that the dialogue and the relationship between coaches and parents is at such a peril, because there may be some overbearing parents, but there's some real coaches that just don't get it. And so that communication is completely broken off. And so this whole notion of sending your kids to play on a sport team and not knowing what's going on in the dressing room or what's going on, or talking to him, and is crazy. It's just crazy, and we really need to bridge that gap, and we need to know, and the organizations themselves need to set out what the objective are for their organization. And for me, if their objective is to win the state title at all costs, probably not a good place to be playing. Because there's nothing good that's going to come out of it. Because even if you win the state championship, at what cost did you win it at? And how many kids did you hurt along the way? And all the other carnage that's left around there. And so what are you left with, a trophy? And so to me that's another thing in our sports there is I said to Tom on the phone, and I don't want anybody to take this wrong, I said, but the best thing that happened to U.S. hockey was 1980 Miracle on Ice. You know what the worst thing of what happened to U.S. hockey? The 1980 Miracle on Ice. Because every coach thinks that they need to be Herb Brooks and coach those players and stand on the wall and go again, like he did because when he was skating. But those are grown men. Those aren't 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 or 12-year-olds. It's a whole different thing there. But now we got all these coaches thinking they're going to be Herb Brooks there and instill this work ethic into 6-year-olds. And if they finish second, they all got to throw their medals into the garbage. I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah, I think that's one of the big problems with youth sports today. It's pretty obvious it's just an understanding of what is age appropriate.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Well,
I have the mic. So.
Okay.
Anyway,
you got the mic. You got the power.
So I played competitive basketball, and I have a 15-year-old little sister, and I've seen how things have changed. Now, all kids get a medal, no matter what happens, And so when you talk about life lessons, how do you, as a coach, still deliver a message like, you're not as good as that guy because maybe that guy practiced harder, or maybe that, are you given that flexibility by the parents, and how does that work?
That's why it's so important, because life isn't fair.
Right.
Life isn't fair, and not everybody gets a trophy. And you know what? You know who knows it the best? The kids. They know who the best players are on the team. You don't need to tell them. They know. My son's 6 years old there, and we had to take one of our kids and move him up there. And he was so disgusted that I moved him up to the next level, because he was our best player and he was scoring. You know what I mean? But he knew it was going to hurt our chances to win. He's 7 years old. This is the conversations we have. So they instinctually have that, and we never want to take that away from the kids. You want to keep that competitive spirit with them. But how you keep that competitive spirit is crucial. And to give them the understanding of what it is to be a player and a teammate and a winner, and how you win and how you lose. Those are the important things that you're trying to instill in youth sports, in my mind anyways. And at the same time, not everybody can be winners. You know what I mean? But we're going to do our best to in the confines of what we have, and we're going to try to improve, and we're going to do all these things, and in the end, there's going to be a most improved player, or whatever it is, and that's just life. That's just life, and that's what we're here for, is to prepare our kids through the metaphor of sports and life in general, to get them, prepare them, because that's what they're going to face.
I'd like to just, I'm not sure how to phrase this question, but about 30 years ago, I had an opportunity in Russia to go on an army base and watch the Russian army team play the Olympic team. It was the most beautiful hockey game I've ever seen, and there wasn't a check thrown. It was all skating, beautiful skating. And I guess my question is, what happened to that in terms of hockey? And what, because it's become so physical and such a show thing, and a crowd desiring blood and so forth. And what do you think about it? Do we have to have all the physical stuff?
And you can't blame it all on Don Cherry.
Well, I think two things. One is, one of the best games that they think ever was played, not one of the best, but was the 1980 game against the Soviets against the Montreal Canadiens, or the Rendezvous in '87, when, in the game that you're talking about, I'm sure there's many of those games there, but there wasn't the end game didn't matter. You know what I'm saying? It didn't really. I mean, they played for pride, but you know what I mean. So they could play a game like that, and their game is beautiful artistry, and they did work on their skills, and all this, and then and I always was an admirer of their players, and go ahead.
Yeah, no, just to add on to that, I have a perspective on it. What the Eastern Bloc countries did, well, they doped their athletes, number one, which was not good. But one thing that they did very well was they believed in sports science and teaching technique at a very early age. And I think in our sports here, whether it be hockey or otherwise, there's sort of just this, we tell kids to be tough and go get them, but we don't teach them necessarily the skills at an early age on how to compete. Those Eastern Bloc countries were very good at teaching technique and how to literally play the game. And once boys grew into their bodies, and of course they're going to be, the testosterone is going to kick in, and they're going to be, they'll be men. But I think there was more of a premium, and I don't know the hockey culture, but I would say across the board there was more of a premium on technique.
And I agree with that. And I'll just give you a quick glimpse into the hockey culture, and I can try to sum it up like this. There's a need to win in our sport at the professional level. And so we have 700 players, or the best players in the world, playing in the National Hockey League. Unbelievable, trained, skillful athletes. Unbelievable. The separation between the best players and the top player has probably never been so close, the gap. So you take all these players on 30 different teams, all vying for one trophy, not to mention of themselves vying to have a good year for contracts. The difference of that, what happens is that there's only a certain amount of ice available when you're out there, with two teams are out there. And if I'm going to be successful, I can't have somebody close to me all game long to be successful. And so what happens is, in our game there, there's a huge intimidation factor in our sport. And the intimidation factor becomes that I can't allow the guy on the other team to be close to me and be checking me all game long. Because if he does, and I allow that, I can't score a goal. I can't help the team. And so I need to back him off. And the way to back him off is through physical intimidation. And that's just a part of our game that will never go away. And so when you talk about that game that you talked, that an exhibition game like that, the end game, it didn't really matter. But when you put all the money, the franchises, the trophy, the history, the legacies, and all that into one thing, the game changes. And then it gets down to the players that can do all that and survive the intimidation. There's a ton of hockey players playing over in Europe right now that are tremendous, tremendous hockey players, but they'll never, ever be able to play at the NHL level because there's superior talent and skill, and they're willing to pay the price that is required to play at our level and in our sport. And you can look at that two ways. You can look at it that adds that incredible element of the artistry and the skill with the bravado and courage that it takes to play, or you can look at it that is hurting our sport because we're not respecting each other. And there's that fine line of what makes art, in my mind, of marrying those two things together, of the guy that is willing to do anything to play the game and to win, along with the skillful artistry that he's worked his whole life on mastering. So when those two worlds collide, it in my mind, that's what makes our game, separates our game from many others. And without it there, our game changes. We can still have a beautiful game, but it's not the NHL, so don't call it the NHL. You know what I mean? And so and my last point is, so our challenge is to play what I'm talking about without the deliberate intent to injure blows to the head that are crippling our game, but still the physical element to our game and the willingness to go stand in front of the net and knowing it's not going to be a pleasant experience, or going into the corner first and it's going to be an unpleasant experience, but willingness to do that in order to be successful. That's what separates our game. That's why only 700 players can play in our sport, where there's thousands that have the talent to play but can't get to that point.
One more question.
One more question. Thank you. Hi. I wanted to ask you a question about the difference between skills in athletes and the small difference between the skills in many of the athletes that reach the level that you reached, and those that are really become part of a team. That there's a difference between a talent, a skill, and also feeling a part of a team. And I was thinking about the New York Giant baseball team this year, who had such a low salary level, but they won the world championship. Right. That they somehow figured out how to be part of a team. And that superseded any kind of skill.
Well, that's the beauty of team sports. That in essence is the most beautiful thing in team sports, is when you have a team that really figures out a way how to play and act like a team. And that's not easy because there's egos and motives and that aren't necessarily the best thing, and you're being asked to do something that isn't necessarily the best thing for you personally or for your career, but it's the best thing for that team. Are you willing to do that? That's a skill set in itself. We can talk all we want about throwing the ball or catching the ball and working your whole life on those skills, or skating or stick handling and all that. What often separates the players into our game now is a skill set that they have off the field. Are they a good team player? Do they have what it takes to have the character and the professionalism to act and make the right decisions off? In the old days, I go to the draft now. The old days, show me the best athlete. Oh, I'm taking him. Now they have interviews. They want to know the character of the players. Character is superseding some of the skills sometimes now, because they know that the kid might have adequate skill, but what he's going to give us as far as character and professionalism there, often will put him into a higher position in the draft, or even make it, whereas before he would never even be looked at. So that's a skill in itself there, and to me that is I'm not going to say it's the most important thing, because obviously you have to have the physical skill and all that, but nowadays, boy, that is just absolutely essential, and that's why we're really missing the boat at our youth level right now, because we're not teaching that. It's all about playing on the A team, what's the A team? You don't learn the lessons on the A team. There's no adversity. You don't learn how to be a player, all those things there, and we're really missing that, and we need to get back to that.
Mm-hmm.
So
if to a certain age you were allowed to coach hockey with no parents anywhere near the rinks, how would the game change for the kids?
I think a coach at the minor level has a real responsibility. And I think if you're going to sign up to be a minor league coach in any sport, the number one responsibility you have is how to make that a better kid. You know, son or daughter. And the only way that you can do that is by, like I talked about earlier when we started talking about, you got to get to know that kid. What's the best way to get to know that kid is to get to know their parents. So you have an understanding of what that child's going through. And I went to see a game the other day there, and the kid, the whole time he was on the ice there, he was looking at his dad standing in the corner. Because he wanted, either he's looking for his dad's instructions or he's looking for his dad's approval of whether he was doing a good job or he was doing the right thing on the ice. He couldn't even play the game. And so I don't buy the notion that it would be easy for us all to say no parents and let's go play. But what are they going to get when they go home? Is the messaging continuous? I want to talk to the parents there. So I'm trying to establish a continuum from the hockey rink to home, or from the home to the hockey rink. You know, or vice versa there. And it's a big responsibility, you know, but our kids are big responsibilities if you're going to sign up to be a minor hockey league coach or a minor sport coach. And so, you know, and I think that division between and I can see, listen, I've seen the parents and I've seen the coaches, so there's good and bad on both sides. But the organizations themselves have to set the precedent of what they want out of their organization. They need to hire the coaches that are going to follow this protocol. The parents need to come in and they need to be educated. And so together you collaborate, because in the end, what are we all there for? You're there to help your child. He's there to become, you know, hopefully he improves his skating, but more importantly, he learns how to get along with his kids on his team and all the other lessons that it serves when you play. And I'm only using hockey, but it could be baseball or anything else. That's what we're there for.
Lessons that you ultimately take into the adult world when you become citizens, business leaders. You know,
I played 26 years. I've been retired, and I've been in boardrooms for the last 7 years there, and it is amazing to see the similarities between the sporting world and the business world. And I've been into great companies, and I've been into companies that are not so great, and it just hits you like that going into the meetings, and it's exactly the same. Yeah. The same things that are reasons why people are successful, or in sports, can be in the business world as well.
Yeah, definitely.
This is so wonderful. Let's have one more question.
Yeah, we're having a lot of fun here. One more, and we'll.
We're parents of a NCAA Division I athlete who plays at the top of the thing. So we've gone through everything that you've been describing in terms of the youth leagues and so forth and so on. And what you say just is absolutely right. My question, however, is, as now parents watching this team and watching the coach who wants to win the NCAA, right? We're Yale alumni, and we're delighted that the Yale hockey team is #1 in the country. And as Americans, I love to watch the Olympics and hope they win the gold medal. So where does this all switch from the kid who is brought up as a young player to respect his teammates and to allow a kid who's not so good to play, and then somehow get the whole athletic trajectory going so that, you know, you can still win at the end of the day against other countries, against competitors. Yeah. What happens in there? What has to happen?
Well, see, I never want to take away the kid's chance at is blessed and born with the skills to make it to the highest level. That is not my objective at all. And in fact, I think that kid will flourish under the things that I'm talking about. But we also have to protect the 99.9% of the other kids at the same time. So, and I don't think we're hurting the child. In fact, I think we're giving him more lessons. One of the big things that I would like to see is I think the draft is too young. I think the draft should go back to being 20 years old, 19, 20 years old. We can't do that because of the constitutions and all that, and it's too complicated. Because why? Because at 18, I think at 14, somewhere in there, 14, 15, there is a time when you, as a child, first of all, you're developing. Now you're able to make your own choices. I like the girls. We're not going to play sports anymore. That's my father said. You got school, you got hockey, and you got girls, and you only have room for two, and you got to go to school. so you tell me what you want to do. But at 14, 15, the children are starting to make those decisions for themselves, and it should be their decision. It shouldn't be the parents' decision what they want to do. But they're old enough at that age, and they kind of know where they fit now. They know if they're kind of good enough. They know kind of what their interests are. And so they can make that decision themselves. So I'm thinking right around that age, 14, 15, is kind of the area where you really start on your own branching off. Not because someone's putting you in a league somewhere and he's telling you this is what you do. You're choosing it for yourself. The problem that we have there, because the draft is at 18 there, we're not giving our kids quite enough time to really kind of develop through that next 3 years. I mean, there's ways to do it right now, but it would be better if our draft was a year or two later. Plus, it would be better for the kids that are drafting, and it'd be better for the team. But I think that the objective when you get to the college level there, and those kids now are 19, 20, they know what they're in for. They know that they signed up for, and there is that competitive spirit that I don't think there's anything wrong with.
You're saying there's a time and a place to specialize and really focus on
time and a place to specialize.
And
It's not 8.
And it's not.
It's not 8.
I mean, you look across the arc. I mean, you look at Roger Federer. He had a broad-based athletic foundation, and at 14, he decided to specialize in tennis. Signed up for the National Tennis Academy, and he was on his way.
There's a defenseman in an NHL, and I'll leave it at this, just because it's. But there's a defenseman in NHL, Ed Jovanovski. He's played 18 years. Great defenseman. He didn't start skating till he was 14 years old. But he was blessed with the God-given talent, first of all, and then the passion, once he did decide that he liked it, to go on to 5 years later being drafted number 1 or number 2 overall in the NHL. So all this stuff that's going on there right now is not going to be the difference. It's not going to be the difference. And I just, and we talked about the 10,000 hours and the outliers and all these things and all these, you know what I mean?
That's another hour-long discussion.
That's another hour-long discussion.
But so I'll let Elliot take over here. But I want to thank Mark for coming myself personally. Voices like his are so critical because he is a winner. He has won over and over and over again. And if every athlete was as insightful and as deep and as willing to share their thoughts as you are, a lot of parents would listen, and we would have a much different culture out there. So thank you for.
Now I just got to go make up amends with Mike's son and the boys now.
Well, I'd like to thank you, Tom, as well. And just thinking, I don't think that there is any conversation that we could have had that would have done a better job of validating, I think, for the Aspen Institute, the importance of launching a program that deals with issues involving sports and society. What the Institute is about at its heart are values and leadership. And I think what we've heard today in this passionate and inspiring and candid conversation shows just how important these topics are, and I'm excited that we're going to continue looking at them, and delighted that all of you joined us tonight. And again, it's been a privilege for us to be with you here tonight. Mark, thanks very much.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you.